Heavenly Father, we come to you today knowing that all that we do, all that we learn is a gift from you. So we ask that you open our minds, you open our hearts, you open our spirits to receive your word. For we ask these things in your precious name. Amen. Okay, today we're going to talk about the growth of heaven. Okay, so last week we were talking about John Wesley, Charles Wesley. They came to America, and we started talking about how Methodism got here. Well, once it got here, we want to see how it grew. But before we get started, we want to kind of get into the feel for this. So I'm going to read this because I want you to do an activity first. But I want to read it because I want to word it correctly. And they worded it very well. So, for the activity today, I want you to think about what makes you who you are. What events, what moments, what experiences have shaped, what have helped to shape who you've become, helped shape your passions, your hopes, your dreams. Maybe it was the first time you rode a bike or your first day of school. So, using the sticky notes that are on your table, everybody's going to do this. I want you to write down the 5 most important moments of your life so far. Okay. Now this is a completely voluntary. Is there anybody who wants to share like one moment? What did you do? Birth. Pretty significant. Anybody else? Okay.
Meeting my friends.
Okay, meeting your friends. Having children.
Richard breaks his foot.
Okay, breaking a foot, breaking a bone. Somebody can share for somebody else if they don't want to tell. Marriage. For those of us who can marry. Being baptized. Okay. I'll take mine. I don't mind sharing. I put marriage. I put graduation. I put the death of my father. Now I was an adult. My dad died, but I'm the only girl of 4 brothers. So I was a daddy's girl. But that was a significant time for me when my dad died. Moving to San Antonio was a significant event for me. And then when I got a divorce, because my husband now is my second husband. Those are significant, life-changing things. Because remember I said it could be good or bad. And for me, growing up as a kid, I was that, for you as 8th graders, you may not realize it, but I was kind of that ideal family. I had a brother and a mom and a dad, and life was great and wonderful. And I had never really had anything bad happen to me. I graduated with honors. I went to college. There was never any question of going to college. And I got married. And suddenly someone comes in my house and says, I'm going bye-bye. Something bad happened to me. Never had happened to me in my life. That was kind of traumatic for me to have something happen that I was taken aback. And I had to deal with that. But it shaped who I was. And because I had been in church all my life, I had that foundation of, okay, who do I lean on? How do I deal with? So you're building your foundation right here. Okay? These moments, you may not know it, but these moments are shaping how you're going to deal with something. And that didn't happen until I was 30-something. But the These grown-ups who are building your foundation are going to teach you how to deal with something. Okay? So, you're going to have these moments. But guess what? Institutions have moments, good and bad. For instance, in our country, how about the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution? But we also have things like the Civil War. We have things like slavery. We have things like internment camps during World War II. We have good and bad, but they made our country what it was. So today, we're going to talk about the Methodist Church. The Methodist Church, and the Methodist Church is dear and near to my heart. I love it like I love nothing else other than my family and God. But it's got good and bad. It's an institution run by people. So on your table, there are, some of you have 2, some of you have 3. There's some information about the Methodist Church. Okay? And what you're going to do is you're going to be reading and using your devices to find out some more information. It's got a question. Some of these you may be able to answer because you remember from last week. Some of it you may have to Google and find out. Okay? Now, I gave you one source. If you go to umc.org, you may be able to just find the answer real quick. Okay? Some of it you may just be able to Google and go, oh, there you go. That's the answer. Some of these are things that are wonderful. Great. No other church or other denomination does this. Some of these are kind of, ooh. Methodist Church even goes, ooh. But it is who it is. It's what it is. It makes us who we are. We learned from it, we moved on. But it is part of our history. So what we're going to do, you have orange stickies, the bigger ones, that you can write your number and write your answer. And then we're going to talk about some of these because we're going to share out so that we all can find out about, I have all the answers. I want you to find out the answers. Because they're in the book, not because I know. Okay, so I'm going to give you about 10 minutes to answer your 2 to 3 questions, and then we're going to share out what some of the answers are. Are you ready? You may go. And I heard a lot of good conversation, and I heard you, I didn't know that. That was really interesting, which is exactly what I wanted to hear. So, some of you who had number 1, I'm going to kind of read through some of these. We're not going to go through all of them, but we're going to go through some of them, and you help me chime in. Tell me what you found out. If I don't say something that you're like, but that's really interesting, you need to tell that. Jump in. So number 1 was Methodist on the frontier, and it says, as the frontier went west, so did Methodism. Preachers who rode on horseback to many churches and towns went with the pioneers. They preached, held revivals, started classes, and planted new churches in almost every new town. Methodist pastors and Methodist churches seemed to be everywhere. Francis Asbury was among the first of these preachers, but he was far from the last. So their question was, what was the name given to these preachers who rode around from church to church and town to town?
Circuit riders.
Circuit riders.
There you go, training.
So Francis Asbury started the circuit riders. All right, so the second one, some of these you're not going to realize you knew it, but you do know it. So the second one was talking about African American Methodist churches. These are not necessarily United Methodist churches. Now, you need to understand that Methodism, we all started from that same root. John Wesley, he's our root, okay? But as we went out and grew, you have kind of these little offshoots of Methodism, but all of us are not united Methodists, okay? So it's talking about African American Methodist churches. And it says, in the 1800s, as our country struggled with slavery, numerous African American Methodists experienced discrimination in the Methodist Episcopal Church. Many broke off and started their own Methodist denomination. These churches still exist. Okay? So, there are 3 of them. They are separate denominations. They are not United Methodists. They are Methodists, but they are not United Methodists. But they are still part of our Methodist family. In numerous ways, these denominations and the United Methodist Church work together. They are called Pan-Methodist. So the question are, what are the names of the three denominations created by African American Methodists in the 1800s? So that was number 2. Okay? Okay.
Okay. Parker.
Somebody.
African American Episcopal, AME.
AME, African American Episcopal.
African Methodist Episcopal Zion.
African American Episcopal Zion.
And African Union Methodist Protestants.
Not quite. You're close. What's the last one? Not Central American. Christian Methodist Episcopal. So if you've ever driven around the city and you've seen AME churches, AME Zion churches, or CME, those were the African American churches. So when you've seen those signs, those are Methodist churches. Those were African American Methodist churches. So a lot of my family members were members of AME and CME churches. And that's the root that started in the 1800s. They left because of discrimination, not being able to be in the churches and form their own. Okay? So, I'm not debating, I'm not going to tell you those aren't other churches, but these were the 3 they were looking for.
I'll tell her that. I didn't see it was her until you turned
Okay. German Methodist, number 3, says during the early years as Methodism was getting organized, there were numerous German-speaking people who were Methodist. Mainly due to language reasons, they did not join the Methodist Episcopal Church. Instead, they formed their own churches, the Evangelical Association and the United Brethren in Christ. Later, these churches united and formed a new church. In 1968, this new church united with the Methodist Church, creating the United Methodist Church. What was the name of the new church created by the Evangelical Association and the United Brethren in Christ? Number 3. Okay, back to it.
Evangelical United Brethren Church.
That's it, the Evangelical United Brethren Church. All right, number 4. The church split. Oh my. The church split. That never happens, does it? Churches never split. They don't argue. Right? Yeah, right. All right. Number 4. In the years leading up to the Civil War, the church split into 3 major denominations. 3. First, the Methodist Protestant Church broke off after several issues, including the role of laypersons and bishops. Then, several years before the Civil War, the church split over slavery, becoming a northern church, which was the Methodist Episcopal Church, and a southern church, the Methodist Episcopal Church South. In what year did the church split into a northern church and a southern church?
1845.
Close! Close! Up here! 1844. Y'all only missed it by a year. Y'all only missed it by a year. Alright, let's go to number 6. So number 6 says segregation in the church. Okay? Again, you have to look at the bad too. Sometimes we don't like to look at the bad stuff. But we have to look at the bad. That's what makes us who we are. So it says after the 3 branches of Methodism reunited to form the Methodist Church in 1939, they arranged the annual conferences into 5 jurisdictions based on geography. Okay? However, they also segregated the black churches into a separate jurisdiction totally unrelated to the geographical location of the church. Black Methodists rightly saw the creation of this segregated jurisdiction as a betrayal and contrary to the mission of the Methodist Church and movement. But change did not come quickly. In 1956, the church softened their policy, but the segregated jurisdiction was not eliminated entirely until the merger with the Evangelical United Brethren Church in 1968. Now think about this, guys. I was born in 1963. 1963. So I was 5 when this happened. So this happened within my lifetime. And I'll tell you a story about that in a minute. What was the name of the jurisdiction created by the Methodist Church to keep black churches segregated? That is correct.
Put your hand
Okay, here's a story. Here's a story about this whole thing. Okay? And it's hard for, as young as you are, it's hard for you to understand because you go to school with kids of every race and color and creed, because that's just the way it is. Okay? I went to a church that was a segregated church. It was a Black United Methodist Church. Okay? That church and a white church in the little town. Now, I grew up in Lubbock, which is up in the panhandle of Texas. Okay, that's right. Guns up. That's absolutely nothing to do with anything but that church, there was a minister there who said, this was in the 70s. Now, when did they eliminate this jurisdiction? Stop segregating? 1968, right? This was like in 1971. So only 3 years later, there was a minister at that church who said, this is not right. So this little church that I was in was about to be closed. They said, you don't have enough members, we can't keep it open, we can't keep a minister here, we can't keep a minister here, we're going to do away with this church. His church was going to be closed. Can't keep a minister. Okay. So he said, look, we're both in dire straits. What if we merge our churches together? And we've got one church, we can keep a minister, we can pay everybody, everybody's good. Okay? Think about it, guys. 3 years ago, they were keeping everybody separate. And they're saying, somebody is saying, we're going to put your churches together. And y'all are going to all come together and have a church. That was unheard of. That was really unheard of in a little town up in West Texas. Okay? There were people whose jobs were threatened. There were people who were told, don't you dare do it. They were threatened with bodily harm. It was not a cool thing. But that was the church I went to. Okay? Now, I was 6. I was 6 years old. I didn't know about that. I just knew I went to my little church, and everybody said, come on in. I was happy. I didn't know any different. I just went to church with people who loved me and took care of me and nurtured me. And that's what I grew up learning. Church was where you went to learn about God and be nurtured. I didn't know there was such thing as a white church and a black church. It was just church. I didn't know about this until I got older and my parents said, you know, it's a big deal that you grew up in that church. And you are a very lucky child, and that you have a very rich background. And you need to respect that background. Okay? So it's really when I came here to walk into the doors of Alamo Heights and to just people to say, come in. No, they don't treat me any differently. You guys, I mean, I'm standing here. I have been in churches where no, don't think so. You don't teach class. You don't stand in the pulpit and talk. This is 2016. Okay? I'm here for a reason. Because you guys nurtured and cared for me. So please know, I do not take it lightly that I get to be here. Okay? And so when I stand in front of you, I stand in front of you in awe. And very humble and very privileged to stand in front of you. Because I have been in a church where they said, we don't want you to teach our children because you're not like us. Okay? So I take this very seriously. It is what it is. Okay? Yes, sir.
Teacher, I got a question for you.
Okay.
Maybe a great answer. So I was raised Methodist, but I'm still questioning in my mind part of it. There's all these denominations.
Uh-huh.
There's all, you know, for Christians, and I'm a member of the Methodist Church, always have been. I'm a member of a Methodist church. But, you know, going back to all the churches where you're sitting here asking questions about what you just said with your, how do you in your mind, not accept but rationalize? You know, I'm going to Methodist instead of this denomination, that denomination. You know, there's all this non-togetherness as far as denominations, based on whatever. You know, it's still here today. So how do you rationalize the unity of Christians from that context, non-denominational, all this? Does that make sense?
Yes. Because we're people. I don't think, I think God sometimes, He gives, well, it's not sometimes, God gives us choices. Just like Jesus gave us choices, and we have to choose. And I am very hopeful because I look at all these seasoned faces and young people who are going, you know what, it doesn't matter. You are who you are. And we take you in, and I see it gets better. Every generation, it gets better, and it gets better, and it gets better, and that's what makes me hopeful. And I see that the world gets better, and I am always optimistic that the young people that are coming up are gonna make it that much better. And it's old people like me that are just holding on to old things that hopefully they're gonna change me for the better. And that as they become better Christians, they will help me become better Christians. I believe in them. I know that as they are sitting here and they are listening and they are hopefully as I'm growing and becoming better, and they're sitting here going, you know what? She said something, or my leader said something. I'm going to take that and I'm going to run with it and I'm going to become that much better. They're going to make it better. They're going to make the world better. So that we don't have that. I believe that. I believe God's kingdom is going to come. I believe that with every fiber of my being. And they are the future. They are the ones who are going to make it better. I just believe that. I'm going to help, but I think they're the ones that are going to make it happen. That's what I have. That's the hope in my heart. I've seen it get better. The fact that I'm standing here means it's better.
Well, I think to Justin's question, I grew up very similarly, not in this Methodist church, but in a Methodist church. And I think, kind of what he's asking and what I think a lot of people need to hear is that the culture of the Methodist church is ever changing. And it continues, it started as kind of a pushback against very rigid, very, the social strata as it was in England, and allowing common people to come in and talk about their common problems and work through solutions on a day-to-day basis for real-life issues. And one of our last questions was the social principle, the social justice issue, which I think is really important because how do young people choose a church? I mean, that's kind of what he's asking. Like, what is it about the Methodist church that makes it better or different than the Catholic church or the Baptist church? And what my take was always growing up, my church was chosen for me by my parents. That's the church we went to. But, their choice was, this is more in line with the principles that we practice within our home, which is acceptance and love and, hopefully some social progression. And we would talk through those things as they came up because the church has a stance on a lot of pretty controversial public issues, and that is what keeps everyone moving forward.
And the Methodist Church, because of those social principles, and we have those social principles, really does look at what's going on in the world. And they look at how does that relate biblically. And the Methodist Church fights. I mean, if you've never been to a general conference or annual conference, they fight. I mean, it's like a family sometimes. You'll see their point, but in the end, they are family, and they love each other through it, and it's for all the disagreements, they go, we are a church, we are a family, we are God-based, and we're trying to make the world better. And I am Methodist for that reason. I chose Methodism partly because that was what my family was. But I think my family chose it because they took on issues of racism and segregation and who's in the church, who gets to come to be in the church. And there are those denominations that say, well, you can't, but you can. And I think that's part of what Methodism says. You have to look at what are the principles. What do you believe? And they ask you that. That's part of what confirmation class is. What do you believe? And they want you to look at that. And if Methodism, if that's what you believe, then they say, then you come to us. If it's not, Methodists say, then you need to go find that. We're here for you if that's what you believe, but if it's not, then you go find it. They're not so rigid, by golly, you gotta be here. They They want you to examine, what is it in your heart? And that's what we're here to do. That's what the whole process of confirmation is. What do you believe? What is God saying to you? It's not just, okay, you come and then we're going down there and we're going to do our thing and you're here. This is your time to examine, what is God saying to you? We want you to be in our family, but if God is speaking something different to you, then you've got to follow what God is speaking to you. I truly believe that. I think that's what you've got to examine. And that's why we spend so much time, because otherwise we could do it in a couple of weeks and take you down there. That's why this is a long process. And it's a serious process, and that's why your parents are involved, and that's why we have ministers here with you, because it's a very long, it's a very serious process, and we all take it seriously. That's why they spend a lot of time on this. Some places they just kind of throw you there and go, okay, we'll see you. But we take it seriously. There's a lot of prayer. They asked me to do this very well in advance, and I said, whoa, what do you need me to do? And are you sure I'm the right one? And I prayed very long and hard, because I'm like, I don't want to just be someone who's standing in front throwing stuff at kids. Because this is a serious thing. Okay, any questions before I give you your homework? Because the teacher and me so love homework. All right, here's your homework. Oh, it's not hard. Okay, here is your homework. Only one thing. Only one thing, and it goes back to the questions and the discussions we had. Ask someone, ask me, ask the pastor, ask the youth director, someone, why are they Methodists? Why? Because that's part of your journey. Most of us are here. We may not have put that as one of our 5, because most of us as adults have more than 5. But there's a reason we are Methodists. We chose Methodism more than, and we stayed Methodist for more than, well, it's just because our parents picked it. My parents picked it for me because that's where I went to church as a youth. I stayed Methodist for a reason. I'm becoming a Methodist pastor for a reason. Find someone. If not, I know it's busy right now, but sometime between now and when you actually are confirmed, this is a very serious task. You need to ask someone, why are you Methodist? And have them talk to you about that. That's your homework. I've enjoyed it. Bye.